Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. Tair Rada's story. Tair Rada was the pride and joy of Shemuel and Ilana Rada, inhabitants of the peaceful Katzrin, a short distance from Haifa in Israel. She grew up with her older siblings, Roy and Ohad, who were always watchful and caring towards her. Tair's vivacious spirit, love for the arts, and talent in dance made her stand out. Her friends fondly referred to her as their guiding star. Naturally, Tair's charisma meant she led and others were inclined to follow. Though her beauty and wit sometimes brewed jealousy among other young girls, any rifts were generally short-lived since many of these girls had been friends from childhood. Tair's daily life included attending a local high school, and like many kids in her neighborhood, she preferred walking to school. It was her routine to call her mother upon reaching home, a reassuring habit for the family. However, on the fateful day of December 6, 2006, things took a turn. Skipping her last class to mingle with her friends, Tair was her usual self, blending in and enjoying the camaraderie. Around 1:20 p.m., she got really thirsty, so she went to the school building to get a drink. Some younger students recall seeing her on the floor where the 10th grade classrooms were located. However, at night, when the usual call didn't come that evening, her mother grew anxious. Initially dismissing it as a simple delay or a visit to a friend's house, worry soon set in when Tair was nowhere to be found. Her family tried calling her many times on her phone, but she didn't pick up. This made them worry and feel very sad. Ilana's motherly instincts screamed that something was wrong. Without a second thought, she mobilized a search party made up of relatives, friends, acquaintances, and even strangers, all rallying to find Tair. Shemuel, in sheer desperation, joined the search, navigating through the cold, dark streets. The level of distress and panic among Tair's family was palpable. Nobody had seen her since she went into the school earlier, so the police were quickly sent to the school to start looking for her. At around 7 p.m., a group mainly comprising the Rada family's close circle ventured into the school. They searched through the dark hallways and rooms until they got to the girls' restroom for 10th graders. There, they found something unsettling. One of the restroom stalls had its door locked. They saw feet inside, but when they called out, there was a spooky silence, and nobody responded. They used a nearby stall to help them look over, and what they saw was beyond belief. Tair was lying there, not alive, and it was clear that something terrible had happened to her. The walls and floor showed signs of something really scary. She had injuries that were proof of a violent attack, and it was clear that her last moments were filled with fear. The shocking discovery deeply shocked the whole community. Shemuel, who was in a lot of pain, couldn't get close to the crime scene because of how horrifying it was. Tair's brother was so upset that he had to be held back. Everyone in the community was really upset and angry. They couldn't understand how something so terrible could happen in a place where children were supposed to be safe. Parents were worried about their kids' safety and talked about whether it was safe to send them back to school. For a while, the school became a place where a crime had happened, and all the normal classes and activities had to stop. People were confused because the police were searching in a wider area instead of concentrating on the school, which is what the locals thought they would do. The police were talking to people to find out where Tair had last been. 2 people who knew her said they saw her go up the school stairs by herself, without anyone following her. Many students reported being in the restroom around the same time frame as Tair, with several pointing out peculiar occurrences. In the span of 40 minutes, an estimated 10 to 12 girls used the restroom. Yet the police chose to interview only a handful. What struck investigators as particularly odd was how amidst this constant traffic, no one seemed to have witnessed or heard the violent act that took Tair's life. Some students noted anomalies, like the presence of an unfamiliar girl with curly hair. One of Tair's friends, who was confident she knew most of the student body, couldn't recall seeing this girl either before or after that day. Although the mystery girl wore a school shirt, she was perceived as a new student. A specific student claimed to have observed 2 sets of feet in the stall where Tair was later found. Tair's recognizable sneakers and another pair of youth-sized all-stars. She, however, dismissed this observation, attributing a foul odor in the restroom as a reason to leave quickly. Another student, after knocking on the stall's door, was informed it was occupied. The police seemed especially interested in discerning the gender of this voice. Even though she repeatedly mentioned it was a female's voice, she felt the officers were unsatisfied with her response. With the whole community offering their help and sympathy, the Rada family was going through a very sad and difficult time, trying to understand that they had lost Tair. Haim Sadovsky, a private investigator, was really moved by Tair's case, especially because his own daughter was the same age as Tair. He got in touch with the Rada family and offered to use his skills to help them. They were thankful and told him everything they could. Ilana mentioned a peculiar observation. When a group of Tair's friends visited to offer condolences, 2 girls seemed to be having a secretive conversation, prompting Ilana to think they might be withholding crucial information. Haim investigated further, finding numerous inconsistencies in their police statements. Interestingly, one of Tair's classmates went to look for her bag in class, but didn't find it strange that Tair wasn't there. Another classmate mentioned that Tair seemed unusually distant during her favorite class, theater. When her teacher asked what was wrong, Tair's response was really unsettling. "Because I fear death." This made a lot of people wonder if Tair had a feeling that something bad was going to happen to her. When they looked into it more, Tair's friends shared a really disturbing story. They talked about an 18-year-old from Tiberias named Avi who seemed to be fixated on Tair. He kept calling and texting her a lot, and he even made a really scary threat. He said he would harm her if she didn't agree to be in a romantic relationship with him. Avi made Tair even more anxious by insisting on meeting her, and when she said no, he threatened her with harm again. But upon police investigation, there was no evidence to corroborate any interactions between Tair and this supposed stalker, Avi. This brought up an important question. Why would Tair's friends come up with such a story? Could it be a way to distract from something else? Haim Sadovsky, during his investigation, reasoned that the extreme violence inflicted upon Tair didn't seem characteristic of an adult assailant. An adult wouldn't need to exert such brutality to overpower a young girl. He postulated that the culprits were likely 2 individuals, roughly Tair's age and stature. Aside from the 2 girls who were previously suspected, there was another person Tair knew who caught their attention. This girl was similar to Tair in terms of looks and intelligence, but they had a noticeable dislike for each other. Tair had told her mom about her concerns regarding this person at the beginning of the school year. What's interesting is that this girl left town not long after Tair's death, and when the authorities asked her about students leaving town, she avoided giving a straight answer. Despite initial suspicions pointing towards Tair's classmates, the investigation did not yield any DNA, fingerprints, or shoe imprints as evidence. Authorities then shifted their focus to a gardener employed at the school. His presence in the teacher's lounge on the fateful day, combined with his seemingly disoriented demeanor, as noted by the school psychologist, made him a person of interest. But the school's gardener had a strong alibi that made it hard for the police to connect him to the crime. Even though the psychologist's statements seemed believable, the police were stuck with a lot of uncertainties and not enough answers. Then, in a surprising turn of events, The investigation started looking at someone else who looked very much like the school's gardener. This led investigators to believe that the school psychologist could have mistakenly identified the two. Roman Zadorov, a construction worker at the school, found himself under the investigative lens shortly after Tair's murder. A recent immigrant from Ukraine, Zadorov had relocated to Israel 2 years prior and was earning a living through miscellaneous construction jobs. He had met his wife, Olga, back in Ukraine, and the two were high school sweethearts. His family made the move to Israel, where he was then employed as a handyman for a contractor. Due to visa restrictions, Zadorov wasn't legally allowed to work, so he was compensated in cash. At his wife's urging, Zadorov had initiated the process of acquiring Israeli citizenship during the time of his arrest. He wasn't fluent in Hebrew and mostly communicated in Russian. The police's suspicion was aroused when Zadorov revealed that he had discarded the clothes he wore on the day of Tair's murder. During the long hours of his interrogation, while denying any involvement in the crime, investigators scoured his residence. They unearthed pornographic content on his computer, which, upon closer inspection, involved young but legally aged women. Further amplifying suspicion was Zadorov's collection of knives, especially given the nature of Tair's injuries. Zadorov's detention was based on the circumstantial evidence of the knives and the school psychologist's potentially mistaken testimony. Adding to the tension was the media's reporting of unverified information, claims that Zadorov's DNA matched that found at the crime scene. This, however, was not accurate. While DNA samples were indeed sent to the U.S. for testing, the results were pending. The interrogation tactics took a contentious turn. Authorities missiled Zadorov, stating that his DNA was present at the crime scene in an attempt to extract a confession. Although Zadorov initially resisted, he was pressured into thinking the evidence was undeniable. He speculated that perhaps he inadvertently stepped in blood he had noticed in the school's male restroom, thus explaining any potential trace. After this grueling questioning, he was placed in a holding cell, suggesting further developments in the case were imminent. Something surprising happened. Zadorov's cellmate turned out to be working with the police. They promised him a lot of money, and even more if he could get Zadorov to admit to the crime. But Zadorov didn't give in. He kept saying he didn't do it, especially because he had just become a father and didn't want to lose his family. But after more than a week, the informant tried a different approach. He made Zadorov believe that the evidence against him was really strong, and his best chance to get a shorter prison sentence would be to admit to a lesser crime like manslaughter. That way, he might spend less time in jail. Under significant pressure, and with the informant's guidance, Zadorov was led to believe that he might have acted in a fit of uncontrollable rage, a side effect of feeling marginalized as an immigrant in Israel. Zadorov started doubting his own memory, pondering over past incidents where he acted out and later had no recollection of the event. Eventually, he mused, "Maybe I did kill her. If everything points towards me, perhaps I did it." Yet inconsistencies remained. Zadorov recalled working late on the day of Tair's murder and wasn't covered in any blood. His discarded trousers, which had been a point of suspicion, were thrown away due to their uncomfortable fit, not any purported bloodstains. Without Zadorov knowing, his talks in the prison cell were being recorded. Taking advantage of Zadorov's growing uncertainty, the investigators convinced him to act out what happened during the crime at the school, and they recorded everything on video. The authorities thought this was the proof they needed. Later, in a press conference, they said they had caught Tair's killer and suggested that a small argument over cigarettes had made Zadorov react violently. However, Tair's family and friends challenged this narrative. They desired more concrete forensic evidence. They felt in their core that Zadorov wasn't the actual perpetrator. Their skepticism was compounded by the police's claim regarding the cigarette altercation. Tair was known to detest smoking and was unlikely to insult anyone, especially someone older than her. Tair's mother, Rada, was persistent in her belief that the real killer came from Tair's circle of friends. Over the years, she gathered information, growing increasingly convinced that there were unsettling dynamics within Tair's close group of friends, leading up to her tragic death. Ilana, while digging deeper into the school's culture, found some disturbing information. She thought that a lot of students might be part of a satanic group, and she started thinking that Tair's death could have been a part of a ritual. As the investigation continued, Roman Zadorov's wife got in touch with their legal team. After they did their own investigation, they came to the conclusion that Zadorov was being blamed for something he didn't do and had been manipulated into confessing. Zadorov quickly recanted his confession, yet remained incarcerated awaiting his trial, which commenced on July 2, 2007. The prosecution's narrative took a dramatic turn. They suggested that traumatic childhood experiences from Ukraine were triggered when Zadorov began working at a school, leading to an explosive reaction when provoked by the students. They also misleadingly stated that DNA evidence tied Zadorov to the crime scene, even though the results from the U.S. had not been received. The defense, however, dismantled the prosecution's claims one by one. Despite the crime scene being dense with various pieces of evidence like blood, hair, and footprints, not a single trace linked Zadorov. His residence was scored extensively, even his washing machine, but yielded no ties to the crime. 3 hairs on Tair's body matched 3 different individuals, none being Zadorov. 60 fingerprints found at the site didn't match him either. Moreover, Zadorov's timeline for the day provided him with a reliable alibi. His whereabouts were confirmed by various people at different times, ensuring he was nowhere near the crime scene during the estimated time of Tair's death. The prosecution relied a lot on Zadorov's confession, even though it had many mistakes. When they reenacted the crime, it didn't match up, and it seemed like the police were telling him what to say. They said Zadorov knew things only the real killer would know, but the defense argued that the investigators actually told him all those exclusive details. When Zadorov was asked to show how certain parts of the crime happened, he kept getting it wrong, and the officers had to help him until his answers matched the evidence. Furthermore, the nature of Tair's injuries suggested they were inflicted by a left-handed individual, while Zadorov was right-handed. The multiple inconsistencies in Zadorov's confession raised significant doubts about its authenticity and the integrity of the investigation. Zadorov's confession had a lot of inconsistencies, and the defense team pointed them out clearly. He said he used a knife with a smooth blade, but the forensic evidence showed that the weapon had a serrated edge. To make things more confusing, during the reenactment of the school, Zadorov took the officers to the wrong restroom. The actual crime scene was easy to spot because there was still crime scene tape there, which was a pretty big mistake. Also, when Zadorov showed how he escaped from the restroom cubicle, it didn't match the evidence at the crime scene. He said he jumped over the cubicle door, but the footprints suggested that the killer climbed over the neighboring cubicle instead. Prosecutors argued that a bloody footprint at the scene matched Zadorov's specific shoe brand. However, this claim lost weight given that no blood was found on his actual shoes. Considering the violent nature of the crime, it seemed improbable that he could be present in the cubicle without his shoes being splattered with blood. Despite these glaring inconsistencies and the lack of concrete evidence linking him to the crime, Zadorov was found guilty and handed a life sentence. The court labeled his statements as deceitful, adding charges of obstructing a police investigation. After the trial, Tair's mother initially believed Zadorov was the perpetrator, swayed by his confession and the supposed footprint evidence. Yet, in the ensuing months, her conviction wavered. Rada soon went public with her distrust in the legal system and voiced suspicions towards students at Tair's school, even suggesting a satanic ritual might be involved. Refusing to accept the verdict, Zadorov's defense team remained undeterred in their pursuit of justice. Further muddying the case's credibility was a scandal involving the presiding judge, who later resigned due to charges of indecent offenses against minors. Public sentiment started to shift towards Zadorov, with many voicing their support for his innocence and demanding justice for Tair. In 2016, A documentary, Shadow of Truth, spotlighted the case and introduced a harrowing confession from an anonymous individual. He recounted a chilling admission from his ex-girlfriend, referred to as AK, who confessed to Tair's murder. This former student of the same high school confessed to wearing the school's uniform, lying in wait, and killing Tair in a ritualistic manner. This confession eerily aligned with earlier police testimonies from a student. Ak's backstory further darkened this narrative. She had a traumatic childhood, which included witnessing extreme violence and being concealed in a wolf's corpse for warmth. These experiences led her to have disturbing fantasies about violence and blood, to the point where she became obsessed with them. After Tair's murder, AK supposedly told her lover all the gruesome details of the crime, even showing them her blood-soaked clothes and the murder weapon. She went into great detail about what she did and what happened afterward, and it strangely matched what investigators had already found. Bringing back these unsettling claims and stories only added to the complexity and uncertainty of the case. In the dark aftermath of Tair's murder, AK stayed close to the lifeless body, hiding until it was safe to leave. She managed to slip away without anyone noticing, changing out of her blood-stained clothes and getting clean ones before making her escape. Once she got home, she cleaned herself up and disappeared from everyone's radar. Roman Zadorov's defense team was eager to probe deeper into the account, relayed by AK's ex-boyfriend. They subjected him to 3 lie detector tests, all of which he passed without any signs of deceit. This prompted the police to arrest AK, a striking blonde woman who vehemently denied any involvement in Tair's killing. AK shifted the blame to her former lover, accusing him of both harboring bloody fantasies and physically assaulting her. Things took a really unsettling turn when AK, who was on house arrest, tried to harm her current boyfriend. When he rejected her, an intoxicated AK threatened him with a piece of broken glass. Luckily, people nearby stopped her from carrying out the attack. When the police arrested her, AK suddenly had a scary change of heart and confirmed the horrifying things her ex-boyfriend had told them before. Even though AK was found unfit to go to trial for the attempted murder and was sent to a mental health facility, no formal charges were filed against her. On the other hand, her ex-boyfriend had to deal with charges of obstructing justice and indecent assault while he was in prison. While he was behind bars, the authorities made him a proposition. If he took back what he had said about AK's involvement in Tair's murder, they would drop his charges. He strongly and dramatically refused, even threatening to take his own life, while insisting that AK was responsible for Tair's tragic death. The tragic murder of Tair Rada not only took away a young, promising life, but also shattered the lives of those who loved her. The passing of Shemuel Rada, Tair's father, in January 2016, further added to the family's anguish. During Shemuel's final farewell, Ilana read his heart-wrenching words, calling Shemuel a king soon to be reunited with his queen. Tair underlined the depths of her pain. And amidst her own overwhelming grief, she expressed her own yearning to join them. Yet, the story continued to unfold. The discovery of new forensic evidence in 2018 threw a wrench into the case's perceived conclusions. The matching DNA of a hair found on Tair's body to the man who had earlier made revelations about AK muddied the waters even more. It raised pressing questions. Was he the true perpetrator, or had he been speaking the truth throughout? His proximity to AK during the murder, and the fact that criminals often immerse themselves in investigations added layers of complexity. In 2019, Zadorov's attorney Yoram Halevi filed a request with the Supreme Court for a trial, claiming the existence of a lot of new evidence that proves unequivocally that Zadorov did not murder the deceased and could not have murdered the deceased. In a dramatic ruling in perhaps the most famous murder case in Israeli history, Roman Zadorov was acquitted on March 2023 of the 2006 murder of a 13-year-old schoolgirl that horrified the nation, in a retrial that overturned previous convictions that saw him serve more than a decade behind bars after being sentenced to life. The panel of 3 judges at the Nazareth District Court announced a 2-1 decision to exonerate Zadorov, who burst into tears and later said, "The truth triumphed. I am happy. I was confined to my home. Now I will take my children for a stroll." Judges Asher Kula and Danny Sarfati acquitted Zadorov, while the 3rd judge, Tamer Nissim Shai, ruled that he was guilty. The verdict is some 700 pages long. A representative of the state prosecutors in the case said her team would study the verdict and then decide whether to appeal the acquittal to the Supreme Court. At the end of the verdict reading, Judge Kula turned to Ilana Rada, the victim's mother. "We tried to solve the mystery, but it is possible that Tair took her secret to the grave," he said. Ilana Rada answered, "At last, after 16 years of lies, justice was served. The war is just beginning. This is a cover-up by the prosecution. The prosecutors of the State of Israel murdered my daughter," she added, reiterating her past accusations that the poor investigative work and alleged framing of Zadorov had been tantamount to murdering her daughter all over again. While at the moment no one has been charged for Tair's murder, we hope it will happen in a near future. For more heart-rending tales and true story crimes, remember to subscribe and like. Stay respectful in the comments, especially considering the grieving families. Until next time on Unreal True Crime, stay safe and good night.